The day I announced that all the family's assets would be in my name and that my son wouldn't have access to a single cent while he was married to her, my daughter-in-law ripped the ring off her finger, threw it on the table, and said she didn't want anything to do with him anymore. That's how I finally discovered who she really was. My name is Helena. I'm 62 years old, and I've always been a mother who gave everything for her family. I worked my whole life, built an honest fortune, and built a company from scratch. But there's something nobody teaches you. The more you achieve, the more you need to protect those you love. When my son, Leonardo, showed up with that young woman, beautiful, polite, admirable in his eyes, I felt something I can't explain. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't antipathy. It was distrust. A persistent feeling that she looked too much at the walls of my house, at the cars in the garage, at the jewelry around my neck, and not enough at my son's heart. Over time, this feeling turned into certainty. But I couldn't accuse her without proof. And I also couldn't allow my son to give his life to someone who perhaps loved money more than him. So I did what every mother who loves deeply does. I tested her. I created a plan, a silent test, a charade that would reveal the truth. And when the day of the family meeting arrived, when everyone sat waiting for me to talk about inheritance, that's when her mask fell. I haven't forgotten the expression on my daughter-in-law's face. First disbelief, then anger, then pure hatred, and finally, the final blow, her abandoning my son right then and there. But this story begins long before that day. It begins the moment I realized I needed to do everything to protect my boy's heart, even if he never understood my decision. He thought I was exaggerating, until he discovered that the only person who truly protected him was his mother. My name is Helena, and if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that nothing falls from the sky. I was born in a house so small that when it rained, we had to put basins on the floor to avoid sleeping soaked. My father worked as a bricklayer, my mother as a neighborhood seamstress, and both did everything possible to raise 3 children with dignity. I grew up hearing phrases like, "It's going to be difficult. You need to be strong. A woman shouldn't depend on anyone." And perhaps that's why, while still very young, I decided to build my own life with my own hands. At 19, I started working as a secretary in a small metalworking shop. It was a simple job, but I learned to observe how people negotiated, how they managed, how they spoke to clients. I wrote everything down, sometimes in a notebook, sometimes in my mind. And at that time, while my friends dreamed of marriage, my dream was different, to have something that was truly mine. At 27, I did the craziest thing in my life. I quit my job, sold my car, gathered my savings, and opened my first company, a micro auto parts workshop. It was years of struggle. I spent entire nights sleeping on the factory floor, eating cold-packed lunches, negotiating with suppliers, dealing with defaults, facing bankruptcy. I only won because I persevered, and because I always believed that poverty doesn't define destiny, only a starting point. At 38, when my company finally took off, I discovered I was pregnant. My son's father, he simply disappeared when he found out. I never complained. I never cried for him. I just moved on, because I knew that baby would be my whole life. And he was. Leonardo grew up inside the factory, playing among boxes, sleeping on a mattress near the office when I needed to work late. I remember the way he held my hand, afraid of the noise of the machines. I remember him asking me, "Mom, why do you work so hard?" And I answered, "To give you a future I never had." Leonardo grew up seeing my struggle. He didn't have luxury, but he had love. He didn't have a father, but he had strength. And above all, he learned that honesty is the greatest asset anyone can possess. I put him in a good school. I made sure he studied English, music, and sports. He grew up intelligent, sensitive, and generous. And over time, he became the kind of man any mother would be proud of. Polite, humble, and hardworking. That's why, when he finally introduced me to a girlfriend, Clara, I truly wanted to like her. I wanted to embrace her like a daughter. I wanted to see my boy happy. But something inside me, an instinct no mother can explain, alerted me from the first handshake. Clara was beautiful, polite, charismatic, but there was something in her eyes, a cold glint, A fleeting glance at my house. A casual question about the company that didn't seem so casual after all. I tried to ignore it, but then other situations arose. When she complimented my necklace, I felt it wasn't a compliment. It was calculation. When she asked about trips, houses, investments, she seemed more interested in the life I had built than in who my son was. And the worst part, she treated Leonardo as someone who needed to better fit her mold. She kept telling him he should change his car, his clothes, his cell phone. She pressured him, and he, in love, didn't notice anything. He only saw what he wanted to see. The beginning of the nightmare, however, was at a Sunday lunch. I was serving the food when Clara commented, "Leonardo, you need to know that when we get married, it would be good for your mother to divide this company soon. After all, one day it will be yours, and mine too." I froze. She was talking about my life, my sweat, as if she were talking about a t-shirt she wanted to receive. Leonardo noticed my expression and tried to change the subject. But she insisted. She spoke naturally, as if it were obvious, as if it were her right. That night, lying in my bed, I understood. Clara didn't want my son. Clara wanted my company. She wanted my money. She wanted the life I had fought for decades to build. And it was then that I decided I needed to do something. Not for myself, but for him. Because when a mother truly loves, she will confront even her own child, if necessary, to save him. I let Clara think she was gaining ground. I let her believe I was giving in. I let her imagine I was finally accepting. Meanwhile, I planned the test that would reveal everything. I would hold a meeting, announce changes to the inheritance, radical changes, changes that only someone who truly loved Leonardo could accept, and someone who was only there for the money wouldn't last 2 minutes. The problem is that, while I was planning everything, my son was falling more and more in love, and that made everything much harder. But one thing I knew, I needed to protect his heart even if I was the one to cause the first pain. The following days were a real test for me, not for Clara. I needed to act as if nothing was happening, as if I were completely comfortable with that relationship that, inside, made me uneasy. And believe me, my friend, feigning tranquility in the face of something that threatens our child is one of the greatest pains a mother can feel. I woke up early every day, made my black coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to follow my routine normally. I answered company emails, reviewed contracts, organized schedules. But even while working, my mind was always alert, always analyzing, always observing. Clara came to my house a lot, and the more she came, the more I noticed details that Leonardo would never see. She looked at everything, from the oldest painting on the wall to the key holder in the entrance. She ran her fingers over the surfaces as if assessing the value of each piece. She smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. I offered her coffee, juice, cake. She never accepted anything simple. She always wanted the most expensive, the imported water, the crystal glass, the gourmet coffee that only I drank on special occasions. It was so clear, so visible to anyone with life experience, but completely invisible to someone who was in love. And that's what hurt. My son didn't see. My son didn't perceive. My son wasn't prepared to understand who that woman really was. He constantly defended her. He said I was exaggerating, that I didn't know how to interpret the new generation, that Clara was just modern. I'd call her ambitious, and not healthy ambition, calculated ambition. On one of her visits, she looked out the window and commented, "Helena, have you ever thought about building a swimming pool? This house has the profile of a mansion." My blood ran cold. "You?" she said, as if she already owned everything, as if she had some right to what I had built with sweat and tears. But I kept smiling. I continued being the perfect mother-in-law, the cordial mother. At the same time, inside, I analyzed every word, every gesture. Over time, I began to realize that Clara didn't come to my house to see Leonardo. She came to observe my lifestyle, and when his phone rang, when he needed to leave for work, when we were alone, she relaxed her mask. It was in those moments that the real Clara emerged. She rummaged through my picture frames. She asked how much each piece of decoration cost. And in one of those questions, she made the mistake that confirmed everything. "This vase here, it's Murano, isn't it? It must be worth thousands." And she laughed. She laughed as if she were looking at what would become of her one day. I simply replied, I don't know, dear. I've never bought anything thinking about its resale value. She smiled disdainfully, a small, crooked smile, as if to say, well, you should. Weeks passed, and my plan needed to continue. My days were double. In the morning, I worked as a businesswoman. In the afternoon and evening, I worked as a mother trying to protect my own son. Leonardo started talking about marriage. My heart broke inside. Mom, I'm thinking of proposing to Clara. She's perfect, and I want to build a life with her. I swallowed hard. I held my breath. I forced myself to smile. That's wonderful, my son. I hope you'll be happy. But inside me, a voice screamed, if you propose to this woman, she'll destroy your life. Despite this, I would never interfere without absolute certainty. Therefore, I continued observing. I continued analyzing. I continued waiting for the perfect moment to apply the test that would reveal her true character. Clara started visiting us more frequently. Sometimes she would dress up too much for a simple afternoon coffee. Sometimes she would come with her mother, an equally interested woman who would ask me about investments, assets, international travel. I knew I was close to discovering the truth. Clara was becoming increasingly impatient. She started pressuring Leonardo with phrases like, your future is guaranteed, right? Has your mother decided how she's going to divide everything? You need to think about our lives, not just hers. Our lives. She spoke as if my company, my name, my properties were a natural part of her future. Once, Leonardo commented almost innocently, Mom, Clara thinks I should learn more about the company. She says that one day all this will be mine. Mine. My heart ached, not because of the assets, that was never important, but because Clara saw my son not as a person, but as a path to success. She didn't love him. She loved what he represented. And it was with this thought that I decided it was time for the test. I scheduled a family meeting. I prepared an announcement. I tried to appear calm. And throughout that week, my routine became a silent theater. I feigned normalcy while inside, I knew I was about to put everything to the test: her love, my son's lucidity, my own courage as a mother. Clara came to see me the day before the meeting. She entered smiling, brought expensive flowers, and called me her second mother. I smiled back. Helena, tomorrow is going to be an important day for the family, isn't it? I simply replied, yes, it will. Very important. If only she knew how much. That night, I barely slept. I walked around the house remembering the boy who slept on the little mattress at the factory, remembering the times I promised myself I would never let anyone hurt my son. And I decided that, the next day, I would keep that promise, at any cost. The meeting hadn't happened yet, but the atmosphere was already heavy. I felt that Clara was too excited, too anxious, too interested. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that week, the moment that truly made me realize I needed to act fast. It was a Saturday morning, and I had invited some family members over for a simple lunch. Nothing fancy, just family time. Conversation, laughter, home-cooked food. Clara arrived before Leonardo. She walked in as if she owned the place. She looked at my set table and wrinkled her nose. Is that all, Helena? I thought you'd make something more sophisticated. I took a deep breath. I smiled, and I replied gently, darling, everyone here likes simple food, home-cooked food. She gave a mocking little laugh, as if to say, how pathetic. She shook her head and sat on the sofa, crossing her legs theatrically. I think when Leonardo and I live here, we'll need to modernize everything. This decor is quite old. The word old came out of her mouth as an insult, as if my history, my essence, my home were old trash. But I kept quiet. Tomorrow was the day of the test, and I couldn't ruin the plan. Clara continued looking around the house, now silently, but with that assessing gaze, like someone calculating the value of each piece, each wall, each detail. And then she said something that, to this day, echoes within me. Helena, have you ever thought about selling this house and buying a bigger one? After all, now we are a family with a different standard of living. Now we are. I swallowed hard, but the biggest blow was yet to come. Leonardo arrived next, happy, innocent, his eyes full of love. Mom, I brought the wine Clara likes, he said, smiling. Clara likes it. Not we like it. Not you like it. It was always about her. During lunch, she tried to appear polite in front of the family. She smiled, complimented, spoke gently, but always slipped up with a comment or two. Helena, haven't you hired someone to help you yet? This house is so big, it must be difficult to keep it tidy. My brother noticed the tone and said lightly, Helena has always managed everything on her own. That woman is a rock. Clara laughed. Of course, but for how long, right? Things change. I felt the air grow heavy. I felt my throat tighten, but I took a deep breath. I needed to stay calm. Until the most painful moment of the whole day came, the true first climax, the humiliation that gave me the strength not to hesitate in the final test. After lunch, Clara went to the kitchen with me to help, and there, in the privacy of the white tiles, she finally showed who she really was. She put the plate in the sink and said, Helena, I'll be direct. I love Leonardo very much, but I have no intention of living a limited life. I turned slowly. Limited, she continued. He has a guaranteed future, you know. The company, the house, the investments, all of that should already be being prepared for us. After all, it's natural that when you get older, I interrupted her. When we get older, she gave a cold smile. I mean, it's normal for things to be passed on. And, honestly, Helena, I think it's time. Leonardo deserves more independence. And me too. Independence. She said, independence meaning access to money. I took a deep breath. No one had ever spoken to me like that. With such arrogance, such confidence, as if she had a right over my life. But then came the final blow. She placed her hand on my shoulder as if giving a warning and said, I hope you make the right choice tomorrow. For us, for them. As if I were an obstacle in her path to advancement. And before leaving the kitchen, she added, because, honestly, Helena, a woman your age should think less about control and more about letting the future happen. I stood there, my heart racing, my breath short. She had just told me I was too old to have control over my own life, too old to decide what I had built, too old to deserve respect. And in that instant, exactly in that instant, all the pain turned into strength. I realized there was no more doubt. Clara didn't love my son. Clara loved the life she could have with my son. What if I didn't act now? I would lose the boy I raised with all the love in the world. When I returned to the room, Leonardo was hugging Clara, laughing with her, even without knowing that she had just spat poison into my soul. I watched them for a few seconds, and it was then that I said to myself, Helena, tomorrow you save your son. Even if he doesn't understand today, even if it hurts, even if he distances himself for a while, you do what is necessary, because a mother's love isn't about pleasing. It's about protecting, even from what the child himself doesn't see. That night, I prepared every word of the meeting, every phrase, every detail. And when I woke up the next day, there was no more fear in me, only certainty. Certainty that on that day, Clara's mask would fall before everyone, and I would finally discover who she was, and who my son was about to give his whole life to. The night before the test, I simply couldn't sleep. I wandered around the house like a lost soul, touching the walls, the mementos, the picture frames. Each step carried a doubt. Each silence screamed a question. I was about to turn my own son against me. I knew it. And yet, I needed to continue. But knowing didn't make anything easier. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at a photo of Leonardo when he was about 7 years old. He smiled toothlessly, holding a plastic toy car in his hand. I remembered the day that photo was taken. He ran to me and said, Mom, I will never leave you alone. And now, so many years later, I wondered, would he understand what I was doing? Or would he think I was trying to destroy his happiness? That was the pain, the real pain. It wasn't about Clara. It was about losing my son's love. It was about being misunderstood. It was about risking everything for a greater good that he couldn't yet see. I took a deep breath. I prayed silently. Lord, give me courage, and if I have to hurt, let it hurt me, not him. The next morning I woke up exhausted. My heart was racing, with a feeling I'll never be able to fully explain, a mixture of firmness and despair. I set the table as if it were a normal meeting. I arranged everything calmly, each plate in its place, each chair aligned. But my hands trembled. When Leonardo arrived, he noticed. "Mom, is everything all right?" I smiled, trying to hide the turmoil inside me. "Yes, my son. I just didn't sleep much." Clara came in behind him, beautiful, impeccable, with a strong perfume and an even stronger smile. "Good morning, Helena. Today is a very special day, isn't it?" Special? If she only knew! While we waited for family, I stayed alone in the kitchen for a moment, trying to take a deep breath. And it was there, clinging to the counter, that the fear truly hit me. What if I had been wrong? What if Clara truly loved my son? What if my test was too hard? What if I hurt Leonardo irreparably? What if he left home? What if he didn't understand? The worst part of being a mother is this: love puts us in front of decisions that no one else understands. And yet, we have to make them. My breathing became so heavy that I needed support. For a moment, I wanted to give up. I wanted to cancel everything, to say I wouldn't do any more tests, to let life show the truth, even if it took years. But then I remembered the conversation in the kitchen. I remembered the way she talked about me as if I were disposable. I remembered her implying that my son had an obligation to share everything with her. I remembered the ambition in her eyes, and the desire to give up turned into conviction. I wasn't doing this for myself. I was doing it for him. When everyone sat down, Leonardo put his hand in mine and smiled. "Mom, everything will be all right. We're here." His smile almost destroyed me, but I breathed. I needed to continue. Before I started speaking, I noticed Clara restless, looking around as if expecting a prize. She adjusted her hair, crossed and uncrossed her hands, smiled for no reason. She was sure she was going to win something that day, and that hurt me even more because Leonardo thought it was all love. When I stood up, the room fell silent. I looked at everyone, but my gaze met Leonardo's last. He seemed hopeful, proud, happy to be starting a new chapter in his life. And that shattered me like glass. The feeling of losing my son overwhelmed me before I could even say a word. And I thought, if he distances himself from me because of this, I will accept it. But I will never let anyone destroy his heart. That decision tore me apart inside. The idea that day I could lose the person I loved most in my life, all of that made me feel like I was walking towards my own execution. But mothers don't back down, even bleeding inside. I sat down again, before revealing anything, and realized my hands were cold. Clara, beside me, touched my shoulder and said, "Take it easy, okay? We understand." As if she had some right over my life. I took a deep breath. I looked at her calmly, but inside, an ocean was churning. And before getting up to officially start the meeting, I looked at Leonardo again. He smiled, and I felt a tear almost escape, because I knew, after those words, his life would never be the same, and neither would mine. The weight of love sometimes destroys before it saves, and at that moment, I was holding exactly that weight. But even trembling, even insecure, even terrified, I knew there was no turning back. I was going to find out the truth. And I was going to protect my son. No matter what. I stood up from my chair, feeling my heart pounding as if it wanted to burst through my chest. The whole room fell silent, and I knew that this would be one of the most decisive moments of my life and my son's life. I gripped the edges of the table to hide my trembling hands. I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for being here. Today I want to talk about the future of the family, and about how the assets I've built up over my life will be divided." That was all Clara wanted to hear. I saw her straighten her posture, tuck her hair behind her ear, cross her legs elegantly, as if she were about to receive a crown. Leonardo held my hand for the second time. He really had no idea what was about to happen. I continued. "After much thought, I've decided that the entire company, all the properties, all the investments, and everything I've built." Clara smiled, a victorious smile. A smile that gave me absolute certainty that I was on the right track. I finished. "Will remain in my name, only mine." The silence was immediate, a heavy, almost solid silence. Clara blinked a few times, not understanding. "Excuse me, Helena, did you say? In your name?" "That's right," I replied calmly. "Nothing will be transferred to Leonardo for now," she continued, smiling. but the smile was already different. False, rigid, desperate. Oh, of course. When you say for now, you mean until the wedding, right? I looked into her eyes. No, I mean that as long as you are his partner, no assets will pass into his name. Her breath hitched. I saw it. Everyone saw it. Leonardo too. Clara tried to maintain her composure. Sorry. I don't think I understood. You did understand, I replied. I'm not going to hand over the life I've built to someone who might be more interested in the family's money than in my son. That's when the mask began to slip. Clara's eyes widened. She turned pale, and her voice came out like a knife. So you're calling me a gold digger? I'm saying that whoever loves Leonardo stays with him, not with the money. The whole room tensed. Leonardo tried to intervene. Mom, please. But Clara gently pushed him away with her arm, without taking her eyes off me. I want to hear more. I want to know where you're going with this. I took a deep breath. The test is simple. If you truly love my son, this decision changes nothing in your relationship. But if you were with him for money, then now you have no reason to stay. She stood motionless for a few seconds. It seemed like her whole world was crumbling. And it was. And you think it's fair? She began, her voice trembling. To put us through a test like this? Do you think it's right to play with our lives like this? I'm not playing with your lives, I replied. I'm protecting my son's. That was it. Exactly that. The explosion happened. Clara slammed her hand on the table. You are a controlling woman. You want to control his life forever. Just because you have money. She trembled with rage. Real rage. The rage of someone who lost the only thing she wanted. Leonardo was stunned. Clara, what is this? She stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. You don't understand, Leonardo. I'm not going to live a limited life. I'm not going to start from scratch. I'm not going to throw away years of betting on you. Betting, she said. Betting. Leonardo brought his hand to his face as if finally seeing clearly. Betting? You bet on me? Clara realized she had said too much. She tried to correct herself. I invested time. I invested plans. But it was too late. The mask had completely fallen. And then came the final blow. The gesture that sealed the truth. Clara ripped the ring off her finger with such force that she almost hurt her own skin. She threw the ring on the table right in front of me and said, I'm not going to stay with a man who doesn't have a guaranteed future. Leonardo staggered a step back, as if he had been stabbed, and I felt a mixture of pain and relief. Pain at seeing my son shattered. Relief at finally having proof of what I knew from the beginning. Clara continued, out of control. You and your mother are exactly alike. One with nothing and the other thinking she owns the world. I deserve better. And then she left, slamming the door. The house fell silent. A sad silence. A necessary silence. Leonardo looked at me, with eyes that seemed to have just woken from a bad dream. I opened my arms. He came. He collapsed on my shoulder. He cried. He cried like when he was a child. And I just held my boy while he repeated, Mom, you were right. You were right all along. And at that moment I understood. Yes, I had hurt my son, but only because I preferred to see him cry now, than to spend a lifetime being deceived. After the doors slammed and the echo of Clara's scream faded into the house, everything became strangely quiet. But it wasn't just any silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, heavy, but clean. Leonardo continued crying on my shoulder. I hugged him like when he was little, running my hand down his back, as if I could take away, with each caress, a piece of the pain he carried. Mom, he sobbed. How could I not see? How could I have been so stupid? I took a deep breath. It wasn't the time to say I told you so. It wasn't the time to point out mistakes. It was time to offer support. You weren't stupid, my son, I replied, my voice firm but full of affection. You were in love. And being in love, sometimes you see with your heart, not your eyes. He stepped back a little, wiping his face with the back of his hand. She threw the ring in front of you, Mom. She threw everything away as if I were worthless. If you hadn't done this today, I would have married a woman who never loved me. I looked deep into his eyes, and that's exactly why I did it. He swallowed hard, as if understanding for the first time the weight of my decision. The relatives gradually left, some in silence, others murmuring words of support. Some hugged me, saying I had been brave. Others hugged Leonardo, saying he deserved someone better. When the house finally emptied, only the two of us remained, mother and son, and a table with an abandoned ring on it, gleaming like a symbol of everything that was not love. Leonardo picked up the ring, stared at it for a few seconds, and placed it in my hand. "Keep it, Mom. I don't want to remember her for this. I want to remember this as the day you saved me from a mistake." I closed my hand over the ring, feeling the cold metal against my skin. "I didn't save you alone, son. The truth took care of its part." He took a deep breath. "I judged you so much. I thought you were jealous of me, that you were exaggerating, that you were controlling." I smiled slightly, and I accepted being seen that way, if it meant protecting you. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of understanding. The following days were strange. The house was quieter. The phone rang less. The messages decreased. There were no more new photos with Clara, no wedding plans, no conversations about the party, the dress, the guests. There was an emptiness. But little by little, that emptiness began to be filled by something better. Truth. Leonardo started coming closer to me. He would spend hours lying on the sofa, sometimes without saying anything, just thinking. One night, he called me. "Mom, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my son. When did you decide you were going to take this test?" I took a deep breath. It was only fair that he knew. "The day Clara talked about my age as if I were an obstacle, and about you as if you were an investment." He frowned, uncomfortable. "She's always been like that and I never saw it." "You saw what you wanted to see," I replied sweetly. "That doesn't make you a weak man, Leo. It makes you a man with a heart. The problem is that some people don't." He was silent for a few seconds, looking at the floor. "Can I apologize?" "For what?" "For being against you. Until today." I moved closer, held his face in my hands, as I did when he was a child. "Son, a mother's love isn't a contract you break when you make a mistake. You could have hated me today, and tomorrow I would still be defending you." He smiled, his eyes welling up with tears. "I don't hate you, Mom. Today, I admire you." My legs almost gave way. Because it's one thing for a son to love you. It's another thing for a son to recognize who you are. As the months passed, the scars began to heal. Leonardo started dedicating himself more to his own growth. He enrolled in a postgraduate program, began to frequent the company more often, to learn the details of the business not as a spoiled heir, but as someone who understands the weight of each brick. One day he arrived at my office with a serious expression. "Mom, I want to earn my place here through my work, not because of my last name." I looked at him with pride. "Then do it. The door has always been open. But now, you see from the inside." He smiled. "And as for the inheritance, you don't need to worry about changing anything now. I don't want what happened with Clara to make you afraid to trust me." That sentence devastated me. He wasn't just healed. He was matured. And Clara? Oh, Clara disappeared. She blocked my number, blocked his, deleted photos, and moved on with her life as if nothing had happened. I heard from others that shortly after, she showed up with another guy also from a wealthy family. That choice only confirmed everything I already knew. But honestly, she was no longer a burden in my story. It was just a closed chapter. The biggest change, however, wasn't in the money, the company, or the inheritance. The biggest change was between me and Leonardo. He started to see me not just as mother, but as someone with vision, experience, and courage. Sometimes he would come home tired and say, "Today I almost messed up," but I remembered Clara's story. Life began to be divided into before and after that day. Before the test, he thought love was enough. Afterward, he learned that love without character becomes a prison. Before, he believed I wanted to control everything. Later, he understood that I just didn't want to lose him. One day, I sat with him at the living room table and brought up the subject that started all this: the inheritance. "Son, now that everything has calmed down, I wanted to tell you something." He turned to me attentive. What I announced that day was a test, a charade. I never altered any documents. It was just a way to get the truth out of her. His eyes widened. "So, there was nothing on paper?" I shook my head. "Not that day. But today, there is." He moved closer. "Today, I took a folder from the drawer. Inside, official, updated documents. Today, my son, the inheritance is divided in a way that I consider fair. You are my only son, but I didn't put everything in your name. He frowned. No. I smiled. No, because I don't want money to be the only thing that defines your future. I want you to build part of it with your own hands. Like I did. He opened the folder, read it, took a deep breath. Mom, this is more than enough. It's not about being enough, I replied. It's about teaching you to be the master of your own life, not just the master of possessions. He closed the folder slowly. I trust you, Mom. Today, more than ever. And it was then that I was certain. That test, that pain, that shock, all of that hadn't destroyed our bond. It had shaped it. I hadn't just protected my son from a wrong marriage. I had helped him protect himself, from his own naivete. Sometimes at night, I still remember the moment Clara threw the ring on the table. I remember the expression on my son's face. And I confess, for a few seconds, I wonder if I would have the courage to do it all again. And the answer is always the same. Yes, I would. Because a mother's love isn't a romantic soap opera. It's not a perfect ending. It's not approval all the time. A mother's love is often about being the villain for a while, to prevent her child from becoming a victim forever. And if one day someone looks at our story from the outside and says, "Wow, what a tough mother," I will answer from within, "Tough, no. Courageous enough to let my son hate me for a day, instead of hating his own life for a lifetime." That day, in front of everyone, I hid the inheritance. I hid papers. I hid numbers. But the only thing I never hid was what always guided me. My love for him. You know, after everything I've been through, I learned something that I want you, who are listening to me now, to take with you for life. True love is not measured by what someone expects to receive, but by what that person is willing to be, even when there is nothing to gain. For a long time, I was afraid of being seen as a tough mother. I was afraid of seeming controlling, exaggerated, jealous. I was afraid of hurting my own son. But the truth is, that day, when Clara threw that ring on the table, I realized something that maybe you've also realized in your life. People show who they really are when money disappears from the conversation. It was at that moment that I understood that I wasn't the one who was wrong. It was the world that sometimes tries to make us believe that protecting those we love is being difficult. It's not. To protect is to love. To protect is to put yourself in danger. To protect is to risk your own heart to save someone who often doesn't even understand what we're doing. And if you're a mother, if you're a father, if you've ever had to make a tough decision for someone who didn't see what you saw, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. My son thanks me today, but at the time, I knew there was a chance he would turn his back on me. Even so, I kept going, because there's a moment in life when we need to choose between being accepted or being fair. And that day, I chose to be fair. Not fair to myself, but fair to his life, to his future, to his heart. Today, he understands. Today, he sees. Today, he knows that love is not blindness, love is vision. And if I can leave a message for you who are listening to this story, it is this: never be afraid of losing someone, when the truth is that you are trying to save that person. Whoever truly loves you will, sooner or later, see your effort. It may take time. It may hurt. It may be painful at first, but the truth always comes back. The truth always appears. The truth always rewards. And now I want to ask you, have you ever had to warn someone, even knowing that maybe that person wouldn't believe you? Have you ever been seen as the villain when all you wanted was to protect? If this story touched you, if it made you remember someone, or if you believe that more people need to hear this, comment below. Your experience can help someone else who is going through the same situation. Like the video. This shows that it's worth continuing to bring real stories like this. And follow the channel, because every week I bring stories that speak of pain, courage, family, and above all, love. A love that cannot be bought, cannot be sold, cannot be negotiated. A love that fights. A love like a mother's.